I was just trying to get through the storm, one wrong turn, one small town buried in snow, and one voice outside my window that knew my name. I should have kept driving. The snow began falling an hour before dusk, the kind that came down in wide, lazy flakes that seemed harmless until they layered themselves thick and heavy over everything they touched, muffling the world until even your own breathing sounded intrusive. By the time I reached the edge of Briar Hollow, the road had narrowed into a single white vein cutting through dark pines, my headlights tunneling forward through a silence so complete it felt staged. I rolled down the window an inch despite the cold, half expecting to hear something wind in the trees, an engine from a passing truck, a distant dog, but there was nothing. The air smelled clean and metallic like ice and old stone, and it stung my nose as if warning me away. The town sign emerged from the snowfall like a relic dredged up from a lake. Briar Hollow, it read, the paint cracked and blistered, the bottom half swallowed by snowdrifts. Something had scratched at the wood beneath the name-deep gouges that might have been vandalism or might have been something else entirely. I stared at them longer than I should have, a tight feeling curling in my chest that had nothing to do with the cold. I hadn't planned to stop here. The map app had rerouted me after the highway closed, and Briar Hollow had appeared as nothing more than a gray dot between two stretches of nothing. Still, the fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, and the road ahead vanished into a forest that looked increasingly impassable by the minute. Practicality won out over instinct. I drove on. The town itself revealed little at first, just a cluster of buildings huddled together as if for warmth. Snow piled against the sides of houses with sagging porches and windows darkened by age or neglect. Street lamps glowed a sickly yellow, their light swallowed quickly by the falling snow. There were no decorations, no signs of life, no footprints except my own tires carving temporary scars through the white. As I passed the first row of houses, I noticed something odd. Every front door was shut tightly, as if sealed. Curtains were drawn even in rooms where a faint light glimmered behind them. I caught movement once, a shadow shifting near a window, and felt a prickle of awareness run up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. People didn't stare out windows in small towns when strangers drove through. That was a myth, something city people told themselves to feel important. Still, I drove faster. The only building that looked remotely welcoming sat at the center of town, its sign swinging slightly in the wind. The Hollow Inn. Warm light spilled from its windows, amber against the blue-gray world, and relief washed over me so suddenly my eyes burned. I pulled into the parking lot, the tires crunching loudly over packed snow, and shut off the engine. The silence returned immediately, pressing in. For a moment I sat there with my hands on the wheel, listening to the faint tick of the cooling engine and the soft hiss of snow striking metal. The inn looked close enough to touch, but something about stepping out into that open space made my skin tighten. I shook myself. You're tired, I thought. That's all. Inside, the inn smelled of wood smoke and something savory simmering in a pot. Heat wrapped around me like a physical thing, thawing my fingers until they ached. The lobby was small but cozy, with worn rugs and dark beams overhead. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, its flames casting restless shadows along the walls. Behind the front desk stood a woman in her late 50s, maybe older, with gray hair pulled back into a severe bun. She looked up as I entered, her eyes sharp and pale, assessing me with a gaze that felt less curious than cautious. "Evening," she said. Her voice was low and steady. "You're cutting it close." "Road closed," I replied, shrugging out of my coat. "I just need a room for the night. And maybe some food if you have it." Her eyes flicked to the window where the snow was thickening. For a moment I thought she might refuse me. Then she nodded once. "We have stew, and one room left." "Perfect," I said, the word tumbling out with more relief than I'd intended. As she took my name, Lena Marsh, and slid a heavy iron key across the desk, she hesitated. "You're passing through?" "Yes," I said, "on my way north." Another pause. The fire popped loudly behind us. "Then you'll want to leave early," she said, "before the roads freeze solid." "I will," I promised, though the intensity of her stare made the simple statement feel like a vow. The room was small but clean, the bed piled with thick quilts that smelled faintly of lavender. I ate the stew downstairs, alone at a corner table, listening to the soft clink of utensils from the kitchen and the occasional groan of the building settling. No other guests appeared. When I asked the woman she'd introduced herself as Mrs. Calder if the inn was usually this quiet, she gave a thin smile. "Winter keeps most people away," she said. and those who come don't stay long." I laughed politely, but the words followed me up the narrow staircase and into my dreams. I woke in the middle of the night to a sound I couldn't place. It was faint, almost lost beneath the wind, but persistent enough to pull me from sleep. For a moment, I lay still, listening. The room was dark, the fire in the hearth long burned down. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the slow dance of snow outside. Then I heard it again, a low, rhythmic scraping, like something being dragged across ice. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to listen. The sound seemed to come from outside, somewhere near the ground floor. A plow, I told myself, or a branch. But Briar Hollow didn't have the feel of a place that employed night plows, and the trees were too far from the inn. Before I could decide what to do, the scraping stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the void heavier than before. I lay back down, telling myself not to be ridiculous, and eventually sleep claimed me again. Morning brought no comfort. The storm had worsened overnight, burying the inn's entrance beneath a thick drift. The sky was a dull, unbroken gray, and the air carried a brittle cold that made every breath feel sharp. I ate a quick breakfast and packed my bag, eager to leave. Mrs. Calder met me at the door, her expression unreadable. "Roads closed," she said simply. "Again." "For how long?" I asked, my stomach dropping. She shrugged. "Depends on the storm. Could be hours, could be days." "I can't stay days," I said. "I have work." She studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You're welcome to try," she said. "But the forest doesn't like being rushed in winter." I almost asked what she meant, but something in her tone warned me off. Instead, I thanked her and headed outside. The cold hit me like a slap. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I crossed the lot to my car, only to stop short. Fresh tracks cut through the drifts around the vehicle, long, irregular impressions that led away toward the trees. They weren't tire tracks. They weren't boot prints either. I crouched to examine them, my breath fogging the air. The shapes were wrong, too wide and uneven, as if whatever had made them had dragged something heavy behind it, or had been dragging itself. A chill crawled up my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I straightened slowly, scanning the tree line. The forest stood silent and still, branches bowed under the weight of snow, giving no sign that anything had passed through recently. "You won't get far," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a man standing near the inn's entrance, his coat pulled tight around him. He looked to be in his 30s, his face weathered and pale, eyes dark with something like exhaustion. I hadn't seen him inside. "What happened to my car?" I asked, gesturing to the tracks. He followed my gaze, his jaw tightening. "You're lucky it didn't touch it," he said. "It usually does." "It." The word slipped out before I could stop it. He met my eyes. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. "Come inside," he said. "You shouldn't be standing out here." Against my better judgment, I followed him back into the warmth of the inn. Mrs. Calder watched us from behind the desk, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. "My name's Eli," the man said once we were seated by the fire. "I grew up here." "What is it?" I asked again. Eli stared into the flames, his face lit with flickering orange. "In winter," he said slowly, "the hollow wakes up." "That doesn't explain the tracks," I said. "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." He told me about the disappearances, the ones that never made the news because no one outside Briar Hollow seemed to care. People who ventured too far into the woods during a storm. Travelers who tried to leave when they were warned not to. Even townsfolk, once in a while, if they forgot the rules. "What rules?" I asked. "Stay indoors after dark. Don't answer if you hear someone calling your name outside. And if you see tracks in the snow that don't make sense." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You don't follow them." I laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You expect me to believe there's something out there dragging itself around town?" Eli looked at me then, really looked, and the humor died in my throat. "I expect you to survive," he said. That night, the power went out just after sunset. The inn plunged into darkness, the fire the only source of light. Wind howled outside, rattling windows and making the building creak. I sat by the hearth with Eli and Mrs. Calder, listening to the storm and the low murmur of their voices. Around midnight, we heard the scraping again. It was closer this time, unmistakable, circling the building in slow, deliberate passes. The sound set my teeth on edge, each scrape sending a jolt of fear through me. Mrs. Calder added another log to the fire with shaking hands. "Don't move," she whispered. The scraping stopped directly beneath my window. Then, a knock. 3 slow raps against the glass, so gentle they were almost polite. "Lena," A voice called softly from outside. It sounded like my mother. It sounded like home. Eli's hand clamped over my mouth before I could respond, his grip firm and desperate. His eyes were wide with terror as he shook his head, silently begging me not to answer. The voice outside sighed, disappointed, and something heavy shifted in the snow. The knocking to the door, and then the door handle began to turn. The latch rattled softly, metal whispering against metal, and for one impossible second, I thought the door might simply open, that all of this would end in something mundane and explainable. Mrs. Calder rose slowly from her chair, every movement deliberate, as if sudden motion might invite catastrophe. She lifted a finger to her lips, her eyes never leaving the door. The handle turned again, a fraction farther this time, meeting resistance. Whoever, or whatever, was on the other side tested it gently, patiently, like a child checking whether a parent was truly asleep. "Lena," the voice said again, closer now, not through the door. Inside my head, it wrapped around my thoughts, tugging at memories I hadn't touched in years. The way my mother used to say my name when she wanted me to come inside before dark. The exact cadence. The warmth. My throat tightened. Tears stung my eyes before I realized I was crying. Eli leaned in, his mouth close to my ear. "Don't listen," he whispered. "It learns you that way." The handle stopped moving. Silence pressed in, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the wind shrieking outside. Seconds passed, then minutes. My muscles began to ache from holding so still. Just when I thought it might have gone, there came a new sound. Not scraping this time, but a slow, wet, dragging noise, like something being pulled across packed snow. It receded from the door, circling the inn once more. Mrs. Calder exhaled shakily. "It's testing," she murmured. "Seeing who's weak." "I'm not weak," I said, though my voice trembled. I didn't answer. She turned to me, her gaze softer than I'd seen it before. "You didn't," she agreed. "That doesn't mean it won't try again." None of us slept that night. The storm raged on, relentless, piling snow against the windows until the world beyond the glass disappeared entirely. At some point, the fire burned low and Mrs. Calder rationed the remaining logs, feeding the flames sparingly. We spoke in whispers, sharing fragments of stories that never quite formed a whole. "It wasn't always like this," Eli said at one point, staring into the embers. "When I was a kid, winters were just winters, hard but normal. Then the mine collapsed." "What mine?" I asked. He hesitated. "The old Briar mine, north of town up in the hills. It was supposed to be sealed, but..." He shook his head. "After the collapse, people started hearing things, voices. At first, we thought it was grief. Too many men died down there. And then the tracks started appearing," he said. "And the disappearances." Mrs. Calder added another log to the fire. "The hollow takes," she said quietly. "It always has. The mine just gave it a mouth." Dawn crept in pale and weak through the snow-choked windows. The storm finally began to ease, the wind dropping to a mournful sigh. I felt wrung out, hollowed by fear and exhaustion, but a flicker of hope sparked in my chest. Daylight meant safety, didn't it? Eli must have seen the question in my eyes. "It's quieter during the day," he said. "Not gone." The power flickered back on mid-morning, the lights buzzing weakly before stabilizing. The sudden normalcy felt surreal. I checked my phone, still no signal. Mrs. Calder brought out bread and coffee, her hands steadier now. "We'll need to check the damage," she said. "Make sure it didn't break anything." "I can help," I offered, eager to do something, anything, that didn't involve sitting with my thoughts. She nodded. "Stay where we can see you." Outside, the town looked transformed. Snow lay thick and undisturbed, smoothing over imperfections, making everything look deceptively peaceful. The tracks around my car were gone, filled in by fresh snowfall as if they'd never existed. As I shoveled a narrow path from the inn's door, I felt eyes on me. I glanced up at the surrounding houses. Curtains still drawn. No movement. "Do they know?" I asked Eli quietly. "About it?" "Everyone who stays knows," he said. "Or learns." "Why stay?" I asked. "Why not leave?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Some try. Some can't. Some think it's better to live with the devil, you know." A shout echoed from down the street, sharp enough to make me drop the shovel. Eli spun toward the sound, his face draining of color. "That's Thomas," he said. "He shouldn't be out." We ran. Thomas stood near the edge of town, gesturing wildly toward the forest. He was old, his back bent with age, his breath coming in ragged bursts. "It's back," he gasped. "In the daylight, it's not supposed to." A sound cut him off, a deep, resonant crack, like a tree splitting under pressure. The snow beneath Thomas's feet shifted. He screamed as the ground gave way, collapsing into a dark hole that hadn't been there seconds before. Eli lunged forward, grabbing Thomas's arm, but it was too late. The old man vanished into the darkness, his scream cut off abruptly. The hole yawned open, edges jagged, leading down into blackness that seemed to swallow light itself. We stood frozen, the world eerily quiet. "It shouldn't be open," Eli whispered. "Not during the day." Something moved in the darkness below. A shape rose slowly, dragging itself upward with a sound that made my stomach twist. Pale flesh stretched too thin over a frame that bent the wrong way. Limbs elongated and jointed oddly, ending in hands. Or what might once have been hands' fingers fused together, tipped with blackened nails. Its face, I struggled to process it. Features blurred and shifting as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. For a heartbeat, I saw my mother's eyes staring back at me, filled with longing. "Lena," it said, its voice layered, many voices speaking at once. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. Eli grabbed my arm and pulled me away. "Run!" We didn't stop until we were back inside the inn, the door barred behind us. Mrs. Calder collapsed into a chair, sobbing quietly. "It's hungry," she said. "The storm woke it too much?" "What do we do?" I demanded, panic clawing at my chest. "We can't just wait for it to pick us off." Eli paced, running a hand through his hair. "There's one thing," he said slowly. "But it's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous," I snapped. "Talk." "The mine," he said. "There's a way to seal it. Not permanently, but enough to put it back to sleep. My father helped do it once." Mrs. Calder looked up sharply. "That path is cursed." "So is staying here," Eli shot back. All eyes turned to me. I swallowed hard. "I'm not from here," I said. "It called me anyway. That means I'm already involved." Eli nodded. "It learns you, knows your shape now." A decision settled over us, heavy and inevitable. By midday, we were bundled against the cold, supplies packed hastily. The forest loomed at the edge of town, dark and waiting. As we stepped onto the narrow trail leading north, I glanced back at Briar Hollow. For the first time, I thought I saw movement behind one of the drawn curtains. A pale face pressed close to the glass, watching us go. The trees closed in around us, branches creaking under snow, and somewhere deep beneath our feet, something vast and patient shifted, as if smiling. The forest swallowed sound first. Snow softened our footsteps, needles and branches absorbed the rest, and within minutes Briar Hollow felt less like a place behind us, and more like a dream already fading. The trees pressed close on either side of the narrow trail, their trunks dark and slick with ice, their limbs tangled overhead like grasping fingers. The light thinned as we moved deeper, turning the world into a dim, bluish hush. I kept expecting to hear it, the dragging, the whispering my name. But there was only our breathing and the faint creak of snow-laden branches shifting under their own weight. Eli walked ahead, his shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the path. Mrs. Calder followed close behind him, moving with surprising steadiness for her age, a lantern clutched in her gloved hand. I brought up the rear, every nerve tuned to the space behind us, to the feeling that something was keeping pace, just out of sight. "Don't look back," Mrs. Calder said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. "Not unless it calls you." "How will I know?" I asked. "You'll know," she said, "because you'll want to." The trail climbed steadily, winding through dense pines that gradually gave way to scraggly birches and exposed rock. The air grew thinner, sharper. My lungs burned with each breath. Somewhere above us, hidden by cloud and snowfall, the hills rose like a jagged spine. After an hour, Eli slowed and raised a hand. We stopped. "There," he said, pointing. The mine entrance emerged from the trees like a wound in the earth. Timber supports sagged beneath the weight of years and snow, some splintered, others half buried. Rusted rails vanished into darkness, their ends twisted and bent. The opening itself seemed wrong, not just dark, but deep, as if it led far more downward than it should. Cold air breathed out of it in slow, steady exhales. I felt it then, unmistakably, the pull. A subtle pressure behind my eyes, a sense of being recognized. My skin prickled and my heart began to race. "It knows we're here," I whispered. Eli nodded grimly. "It always does." Mrs. Calder set the lantern down and reached into her pack, pulling out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unrolled it carefully, revealing a collection of objects that looked more like ritual tools than anything practical: chalk sticks worn to nubs, small iron nails, a coil of frayed rope, and a jar filled with something dark and viscous. "What is that?" I asked, staring at the jar. "Salt and blood," she said. "Mine. It won't take it from you unless you offer." I swallowed hard. "And the others?" "Markers," she said. "Boundaries. Promises." Eli knelt at the entrance, brushing snow away from a flat stone embedded in the ground. Symbols had been carved into it, circles, intersected by jagged lines, worn smooth by time but still faintly visible. "My father showed me this once," he said. "Said if the hollow ever woke too hungry, this was where we'd start." "Start what?" I asked. "Talking to it," he said. The word sent a chill through me deeper than the cold. "You can talk to it?" Eli didn't answer right away. He traced one of the carvings with his finger. "It talks to us," he said finally. "This just reminds it where it ends." Mrs. Calder handed him the chalk. Together they began to redraw the symbols around the entrance, their movements practiced despite the tremor in their hands. I stood back, watching the darkness within the mind pulse faintly, like a throat swallowing. As the last line was drawn, the air shifted. The forest went utterly still. No wind, no creaking branches. Even the faint hiss of falling snow seemed to fade, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like pressure on my ears. Then, from deep within the mine, something moved. A sound echoed upward, slow, heavy, wet. The same dragging I'd heard before, magnified by the narrow confines of the tunnel. The lantern flickered, its flame stretching and shrinking as if caught in an unseen breath. "It's coming," Eli said softly. Mrs. Calder uncorked the jar and dipped her fingers into the dark mixture, smearing it along the chalk lines. The smell hit me immediately, iron and salt and something older, something like rot. "Lena," she said without looking at me, "when it speaks to you, you must answer." My heart lurched. "You said not to." "Not when it calls you away," she cut in. "This is different. It already has you. If you don't speak, it will." The dragging grew louder, closer. "What do I say?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. Mrs. Calder finally looked at me, her pale eyes fierce. "You tell it no." A shape emerged from the darkness. It unfolded itself slowly, as if the tunnel were too small to contain it fully. Pale limbs scraped against stone, skin leaving faint streaks of moisture behind. Its body seemed both too solid and not solid enough, edges blurring and sharpening in turns. Faces surfaced and sank across its form. Thomas's terrified expression, a woman I didn't recognize, my mother's gentle smile. "Lena," it crooned, the sound vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. "You came home." I took an involuntary step forward. Eli grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "Say it," he hissed. My mouth was dry. My thoughts felt tangled, sluggish, as if the cold had seeped into my mind. The thing before me radiated familiarity, comfort. It knew my grief, my loneliness, the quiet ache that had driven me north in the first place without my fully understanding why. "You don't have to be alone," it said. "We remember you." "No," I said, the word cracking as it left my lips. The thing paused. Faces rippled across it, confusion flickering through its shifting features. "No," I said it again, louder this time. "You don't get to keep me." The air shuddered. The creature recoiled slightly, its form tightening, edges sharpening into something almost angular. A low sound emanated from it, not quite a growl, not quite a cry. Mrs. Calder slammed her palm onto the stone, smearing the last of the mixture into the carved grooves. "By the old boundary," she intoned, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "By the debt unpaid and the mouths unfilled, you will sleep." The ground shook beneath us. Snow cascaded from the trees, thudding softly around our feet. From within the mine came a sound like a deep exhalation, long and weary. The creature shrank, its limbs pulling inward, its many faces collapsing into a single, indistinct blur. "This isn't over," it said, its voice fading, stretching thin. "Winter always returns." With a final shuddering movement, it slid backward into the darkness. The mine entrance seemed to contract, shadows deepening, until only black remained. Then, broke. Wind rushed through the trees, branches creaked, snow resumed its gentle fall. The lantern steadied. The oppressive weight lifted from my chest, leaving me lightheaded and weak. Eli sagged against the rock face, breathing hard. Mrs. Calder lowered herself to the ground, her face ashen. "Is it?" I began. "Asleep. For now." I let out a shaky laugh that bordered on hysteria. "That's it? We just go back?" Eli shook his head slowly. "There's a cost." I looked at him, dread coiling once more in my stomach. "What kind of cost?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the mine, his expression unreadable. "It doesn't forget," he said, "and it doesn't forgive. It will look for an anchor." My breath caught. "An anchor? Someone it knows," Mrs. Calder said softly. "Someone it's learned." The implication settled over me like fresh snow, silent, suffocating. "You mean me," I said. Neither of them denied it. The walk back to town felt longer, heavier. The forest no longer seemed merely watchful. It felt attentive, aware of us in a way that made my skin crawl. More than once I thought I heard footsteps behind us, only to turn and find nothing but snow and shadow. Briar Hollow came into view at dusk, the inn's lights glowing faintly through the trees. Relief flickered in me, quickly followed by unease. The town looked different. Snow had been cleared from the main street, paths shoveled neatly to doorsteps. Smoke rose from chimneys. Curtains were drawn back, windows glowing warmly. It looked alive in a way it hadn't before. "Did someone come through?" I asked. Mrs. Calder's steps faltered. "No one comes through." As we entered the town square, doors opened. People emerged, faces pale but smiling, eyes fixed on us with an intensity that made my stomach twist. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She's back," someone whispered. "Who?" I asked, panic rising. Before anyone could answer, a woman stepped forward. She was young, her dark hair braided neatly, her expression serene. "Thank you," she said to me. "It's quieter now." "I didn't do it alone," I said, "and it's not gone." Her smile didn't falter. "We know." Eli stiffened beside me. "What do you mean, you know?" The woman's gaze shifted to him, something like pity flickering across her face. "Every winter it sleeps," she said. "And every winter, someone stays to make sure it wakes again." My blood ran cold. "Stays how?" Mrs. Calder's hand tightened on my arm. "Eli," she said, her voice breaking. "You never told her." "Told me what?" I demanded. Eli's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked at me then, really looked, and there was grief there so deep it hurt to see. "My father didn't just help seal the mine," he said. "He stayed. When it woke again, it used him. Kept it from tearing the town apart." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a low, expectant hum. "You're saying," I said slowly, "that someone has to belong to it." Mrs. Calder nodded, tears streaming freely now. "We thought it would take longer," she whispered. "That you might leave before it noticed." "But it did," I said, "because it wanted me." The woman with the braid stepped closer. "You can still leave," she said gently. "The road will open in the morning. It always does." A hollow laugh escaped me. "And if I leave?" Her smile faded. "Then it will follow." Silence fell over the square. All eyes were on me, hopeful, afraid, resigned. I thought of the road north, of my life before the snow began falling. I thought of my mother's voice, of the loneliness that had echoed through me long before Briar Hollow ever appeared on a map. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint, familiar whisper from deep beneath the town. My name. I closed my eyes. "I'll stay," I said. The relief in the crowd was palpable, a collective exhale. Mrs. Calder sobbed openly now. Eli turned away, his face hidden. As the people began to disperse, the woman with the braid touched my arm. "It won't be all the time," she said. "Just in winter. Just when it wakes." I nodded numbly. Night settled over Briar Hollow, soft and heavy. As I followed them back toward the inn, I felt the ground beneath my feet pulse once, twice like a slow, patient heartbeat. Somewhere deep below, something vast and knowing shifted in its sleep. And I knew, with a certainty that stole my breath, that it was already dreaming of me. And so Briar Hollow fades back into the snow, quiet once more, just another forgotten town on a road no one takes unless they're already lost. The storm will pass, the roads will reopen. Travelers will come and go, never knowing what sleeps beneath their tires, or why the locals never leave in winter. But somewhere under the frozen ground, something listens. Something remembers names. And when the cold grows deep enough, it will wake again. If you ever find yourself driving through falling snow, low on fuel, following a road that wasn't on your map, listen carefully to the silence. And if you hear someone calling your name from the dark, don't answer. Good night.